Mark blinked, confused, as Angela opened the file she'd just been handed. She held up a document, bold letters at the top reading, * Internal Affairs Investigation. Officer Mark Jensen * gasps rippled through the crowd. Mark's mouth went dry as Angela continued, her voice steady but sharp. You've been under investigation for months. Complaints of harassment, excessive force, profiling. Sound familiar? Mark stumbled backward, his confidence shattered. This is a mistake, he stammered, glancing at the crowd for support, but their eyes were filled with judgment. Angela didn't flinch. The mistake, she said, was thinking you could treat people like this and get away with it. She turned to the suited man. I think we've seen enough. As two plainclothes agents stepped forward, Mark's face crumpled. You can't do this, he shouted, but it was too late. The agents escorted him to the SUV, leaving the crowd murmuring in shock. Angela turned back to them, her voice calm but firm. This isn't just about me, it's about accountability, and it starts today. As the SUV drove away, Angela stood tall, her presence commanding. But just as the crowd began to disperse, a man stepped forward from the shadows, holding a badge. Chief Monroe, he said, his voice low. We need to talk. There's more to this than you know. Angela's eyes narrowed, the weight of the moment sinking in. The story wasn't over, not yet. Angela studied the man in front of her, her sharp instincts kicking in. What's this about? She asked, her voice steady but curious. The man handed her a sealed folder, his expression grim. Let's just say Officer Jensen wasn't working alone. This investigation might be bigger than you think. Angela took the folder, her mind already racing, but she nodded, keeping her composure. As the crowd thinned out, whispers of the day's events lingered in the air. For many, this moment wasn't just about one officer. It was a reminder that power comes with responsibility, and abuse of that power has consequences. Angela turned to leave, the folder in hand, knowing her work wasn't done. Back at her SUV, she glanced one last time at the scene, feeling a mix of frustration and resolve. Change didn't happen overnight, but today was a step forward, and she made sure it didn't stop here. The sun blazed down on the quiet suburban street, where Officer Mark Jensen sat in his patrol car, watching every passerby with a sharp, judgmental eye. When a sleek black SUV pulled into a parking spot, he tightened his grip on his coffee cup, muttering under his breath. Out stepped a well-dressed black woman, confident and composed. But to Mark, her appearance didn't matter. He saw only one thing. Within seconds, he was out of the car, approaching her with an air of authority, questioning her presence in his neighborhood. What he didn't know, the woman he was about to confront wasn't just any passerby. She was FBI Chief Angela Monroe, one of the highest-ranking officials in law enforcement. As the tension escalated, Mark's arrogance began digging a hole he couldn't climb out of. With 5 minutes to go, his career and his assumptions were about to unravel in the most humiliating way possible. Angela turned to face the officer, her calm demeanor masking the storm of frustration building inside her. Is there a problem, officer? She asked, her voice steady but firm. Mark, puffing up his chest, looked her up and down, ignoring her question. You can't just park here. What are you doing in this neighborhood? He demanded, his tone laced with suspicion. Angela paused, measuring her response. She had dealt with men like him before, quick to judge, drunk on authority, and unwilling to listen. I'm here for a meeting, she replied, reaching into her bag for identification. But Mark wasn't interested in explanations. Hands where I can see them, he barked, drawing the attention of a few bystanders. The tension thickened. Angela remained composed, but her mind raced. This wasn't just about her. It was about every moment like this, every assumption, every abuse of power. Mark was about to learn exactly who he was dealing with. Angela slowly raised her hands, her calm exterior steadying the growing crowd. Officer, I'm reaching for my badge, she said firmly, her eyes meeting his. But Mark wasn't listening. He was already too deep in his assumptions, convinced he had caught someone who didn't belong. "Badge, don't play games with me," he snapped, his hand hovering near his holster. Meanwhile, whispers rippled through the small crowd gathering nearby. A young man pulled out his phone, hitting record. Another woman muttered, "Doesn't he know who that is?" But Mark didn't notice the growing eyes on him. His ego had taken control. Angela carefully pulled out her credentials and held them up. "FBI Chief Angela Monroe," she said, her voice cutting through his hostility like steel. For a moment, Mark froze, disbelief flickering across his face. But instead of backing down, he doubled down. "Anyone can fake a badge," he scoffed. "We'll see if this checks out." Angela's jaw tightened. She could feel the weight of every person watching. The minutes stretched like hours, and she knew this was bigger than just her. It was a moment that could define everything. Mark snatched Angela's badge and stepped back, glaring at her as if searching for any sign of deceit. "Wait here," he barked, marching to his patrol car. Angela stood still, her composure unwavering, though her heart pounded with frustration. The onlookers whispered louder now, some shaking their heads, while others continued filming. A small boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, asking, "Mom, what's going on?" In his car, Mark fumbled with his radio, his confidence faltering for a moment as he ran Angela's credentials. But the growing crowd outside irritated him. He glanced in the rearview mirror, muttering, "They think they know everything." Meanwhile, Angela remained calm, observing the scene around her. She knew her status would check out. It always did. But this wasn't just about proving herself. It was about holding Mark accountable. When the dispatcher's voice crackled back, confirming Angela's identity with a clear edge of urgency, Mark froze. His fingers hovered over the radio, his thoughts racing. He glanced back at her, then at the crowd. For a split second, he considered walking away, pretending none of this had happened. But the murmurs from the growing crowd reminded him there was no turning back now. Angela tilted her head, her gaze unwavering. She could see the internal war playing out on Mark's face, and she knew this was the moment everything was about to come crashing down. Mark stepped out of his patrol car, his expression caught between panic and defiance. He was about to speak when another vehicle pulled up, a sleek, black government SUV with tinted windows. The crowd murmured, some stepping back, others leaning in to see what was happening. The door swung open, and out stepped a man in a tailored suit, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "Chief Monroe," he called, his voice calm but commanding. Angela turned toward him, her posture relaxing slightly as he approached. "We've been waiting for you. Is there an issue here?"